So, John, I've known you for a while. You are a former fighter who's made quite a career as a boxing trainer. For people, though, who aren't as familiar, would you mind telling people about how you got into training and how long you've been training people, training
Well,
boxers?
well, the thing is, what a lot of people might not realize or know is that I was actually when I was fighting myself, I was training amateur fighters,
Hmm.
and I was literally in between my fights. I was going to national tournaments, and I was going on international trips, and I was all over the country. I had national champions and local champions, regional champions. So I've always been a trainer. Even when I was in my teens, I was a trainer. So the transformation was really natural and easy. I actually trained a female world champion, Elizabeth Mueller, before my last fight. In the year 2000, I believe it was, or 2001, she won the world title at Foxwoods. So she was like my first, foray into the pro game was training her. And ever since, I've trained junior middleweight champion Jose Rivera. I trained Chad Dawson when he beat Bernard Hopkins. I trained Mike Oliver when he won the IBO title. I trained for a time. I trained Pito Cardona, Scott Pemberton. I've been with a few good fighters over the years, and it's been very natural for me to transition.
Thank you. How long have you been working with Arthur?
8 years.
Okay. And how did you get involved in that camp?
Um, Basically, what happened was he wanted someone in the camp who had been a professional fighter before, to kind of relate to him on a certain level. And so Mark Ramsey, who's his head trainer, called me and you know asked me if I wanted to come up and feel it out. And that was in 2000, the beginning of 2016. And I came up, and Arthur and I did the pads, and I showed him a few things that I thought, would help, and he really liked it, I guess, and we've been together ever since.
With multiple trainers, multiple team members, are there predefined roles in terms of like what you do for the team during training camp, what you do during a fight, what Mark does, what other people do?
Right. Everything is very smooth. We're like the epitome of a team, and like when I got there originally, I used to ask Mark, "All right, what do you want me to tell him? What do you want me to do? You lay the ground rules." And he just said, "No, man, like you're here to tell him what you want to tell him." So he said, "Just do your thing." He goes, and I remember him saying to me, because one time, a few times actually, people would interview me, and then they would say, they would call me Arthur's trainer. And I would say, "Hey, man, I'm not his trainer, man. I'm assistant to the trainer." And I would tell Mark, "Man, in case he saw it." And I'd be like, "Man, I didn't say I was the trainer." And he goes, "No, listen, I don't care about that." He goes, "I just want Arthur to win. I'm the trainer, but if people think you're the trainer, I don't care." And so it's just that kind of relationship where, and then but I always go to him, especially in the beginning of a camp, and I say, "Okay, what's the general idea for this fight? What are we trying to accomplish? What are we trying to do?" So I tried to follow his general blueprint.
Hmm. When you started working with Arthur 8 years ago, how familiar or not were you with him?
I wasn't at all, to be honest with you. I almost didn't go because a friend of mine, and I guess he didn't really know at the time, and I didn't know at the time, but he goes, he was telling me about Arthur. I asked him, and he knew who Arthur was, and he was like, the only thing is, he's a really devout Muslim, and he may not want to listen to an American trainer. And I was like, "Oh well, why am I going?" And I didn't know. But when I got there, it was obviously a different situation. My friend was miscalculated. Arthur's very. It's a funny thing about Arthur, and I've worked with a lot of fighters, and some good fighters. They reach a point where you can tell. They don't say it, but you can tell where they don't think they can learn anymore, or they don't want to learn anymore. They don't. They almost feel insulted that you're trying to teach them something that they may not know. You know, a lot, believe it or not, there's a lot of fighters that do that, whether they realize they do that or not. Arthur's the type, even now, where he is right now, if I would tell him something and show him, he would ask me again, show me that again. And then he would be over on the heavy bag working on it, like literally practicing what he was just told, a little bit earlier. He's the type of guy. He's got no airs about him. He's not cocky at all. He wants to learn. He'll tell you himself, I want to learn. Show me something. And when you show them something, a lot of fighters, you show them something and that's the end of it. And they just do it. But Archer's like, no, but why? Why do I do that? You got to explain it to them. Like, why do I do that? What's the point? What are we trying to accomplish here? And so it's funny, but I always say he keeps you on your toes as a trainer because, he wants the best out of you. And he doesn't want you to just tell him throw the jab. He wants to know how to throw the jab and he wants to know why, and so I like it because it keeps me on my toes.
You said you've been with him for about 8 years now. Do you remember the first fight that you worked with this camp on?
It was a guy, it was at the, I'll tell you exactly when it was. It was the day after Muhammad Ali died. And I always remember that because I was driving to Montreal and I heard it on the radio that Muhammad Ali died. I believe the guy's name,
Was
it was
Ezekiel?
something, as
Yep.
I was going to say, it was something like Ezekiel.
Yep.
He was an Olympian for his, I don't know if it was Colombia or where he's from, but I remember he was an Olympian for his country.
Yeah.
Uh, and that was the first fight. Yeah.
Yep. So that was, yeah, June of 2016. So as you said, about 8.5 years now. So at that point in time, Artur is relatively early in his career, but still also pretty accomplished. At that point, he'd beaten Campillo, he'd beaten Gabriel Campillo, he'd beaten Tavoris Cloud. What was your impression of him as a fighter at that time, and how have you seen him grow in the time since?
Obviously right away you're struck by his strength, and not just by watch. Sometimes you watch a guy and you can't really tell like how fast he is and how whatever he is, but the people who box with him tell you, and I trust their word more than anybody. So I'm driving all the guys every day because I stay in the same complex that the fighters do. So I'm driving back with them and to the gym every day, and they're telling me, like, man, it's like everywhere you go, he's there. He's like just surrounds you. It's like you can't escape. He's just on you every second of every round. And they describe his power. They describe all the things about him. So I go based on what they say, and working with him, like I say, it's very interesting and it's fun because I feel like when I do with younger kids. Like when I show them something, it's like, wow, like, wow, I just learned something new. It's real cool. He's the same way. He likes to learn new stuff. It's fun. It's funny to me because he's so accomplished and so good. And, he had, 200 amateur fights, whatever he had. He's been to the Olympics. He was a world amateur champion. He did all these things. And he's still willing to admit that he may actually not know everything.
So in the time, in these 8+ years that you've been working with him, how has he improved?
I believe just on my end, like what I focus on, I believe his jab is much better. I believe his body punching is existent now. He goes to the body now. Which I'm I worked with him a lot. Let's say that I worked with him a lot on body punching. It's really nice when I see somebody on the internet will say, "Oh, that Arthur man, I love his body attack." And I say, "Man, it's cool. Like I helped him with that. It's good." And so I think he's improved just with, I'll say one thing: he has very good sparring partners. Every training camp, there's like anywhere between 3 and 6 guys, and all of them are good. Some of them are guys that I also never heard of till I see them, and I'm like, man, how come I've never heard of you? Like you're good, you're like really good, like you're a good fighter. But and we get guys from Spain, Germany, England, Australia. I mean, all over the world they come from to box with Arthur.
Just thinking through some of the fights that you've been working with him on, obviously the win over Alexander Gvozdyk, where Artur became the light heavyweight champion, the defenses against Marcus Brown, Callum Smith. Who would you say gave Artur the most trouble out of all the fighters that you've cornered him against?
I thought Gvozdyk was the one fight where in my head I was like, at one like normally with Artur, he takes his time and he breaks you down. And I've said it many times, that this is my quote: 12 rounds is a tremendously long time to be in the ring with Artur Beterbiev. Like, I don't care how good you look early on. I don't care how sharp you look in the first or two rounds, because the sixth round is always going to be way different than the first round with him. Uh, but Gvozdyk had a good plan, and he had the skills to match. And there was, I can't say I was worried, but there was a couple points in maybe the fifth round, where in my head I was like, all right, let's start hitting the gas a little bit. Let's get this thing going. Artur started a little slow, but it's to be expected. He's in with a high class fighter. Gvozdyk was high class. So I think, and it's funny because by the same token, that fight and the fight with Marcus Brown, both fights, I think Artur fell behind a little bit, and maybe even with Anthony Yard, but at no time was I worried about losing. At no time, it never crossed my mind, because I just said, I know what he punches like. I know what the 10-ounce gloves feel like, and I know what the pressure feels like, and I know that, like I say, 12 rounds with him is like running a marathon, and you're not a marathon runner, and you're just trying, and you're saying to yourself, I got to do 18 more miles of this. I'm going to die before I get to the finish line. And so it's like I said, I was never worried to the point where I thought he was going to lose, but there were a couple moments in those two fights, Gvozdyk and Brown, where I said, okay, we gotta hit the gas a little quick now. We gotta get going.
I'm glad that you brought up the yard fight, 'cause that's another good example. I like the metaphor of the marathon runner. Do you think it is that guys like Yard or Marcus Brown, they're just trying to out sprint him and they lose gas? Or is this that Artur's, as we sometimes hear commentators say on TV, downloading information? Like, why is it
Right.
that some of these fighters are able to get a strong start, and that Artur is also then able to adjust and come on strong?
Well, there's different factors. Like, one of them is, you start fast, you're doing great, and you expect you're like I'll give you an example. When I used to fight, when I was a pro, I took my time. Maybe it was a negative thing sometimes, but I took my time, and because you can feel your opponent. You can feel at a certain point, you go, oh, he's dropping off. And I always waited for that moment to feel that drop off, so I could kind of push it a little bit and start getting into my rhythm. And with Artur, I think nobody has ever felt him drop off. Like, they're hitting him and they're catching him and they're boxing, and and they're saying, oh, he's gonna get tired. He's missing a little bit. He's gonna get tired, and he just gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and it's just that's just him. And he's almost like unstoppable in that regard, like physically. You're not gonna get this guy tired. Like, you're not gonna win a war of attrition with him. And I think even strong guys like Yard, they know, like they reach a point where they're like, man, this is not good. Like, this I can't win this way. You're not going to beat Artur, because I feel like the battle of attrition suits him. It suits his mentality. Like, he loves the idea of, okay, we're gonna do this. Okay, let's do this. Let's see who quits first. I think he would love for every fight to be that type of fight. And like I say, a smart boxing person, like if I was in the opposite corner, I would say, all right, we got to box this guy. It's no secret. Like everybody knows how Joe Frazier needs to beat Muhammad Ali. And everybody knows how Muhammad Ali needs to beat Joe Frazier. Everybody knows. You don't have to be a good trainer to not figure that out. With Artur, you know what you have to do to beat it, but to get a guy willing to go through that and deal with that kind of power, they're not on every street corner.
Yeah. Well, speaking of guys who would want to and would potentially be capable of boxing, Artur, I know that you've spoken very highly of Dmitry Bivol over the years. What are
Yeah,
your thoughts, exclusive of the upcoming fight? What are your thoughts on Bivol as a light heavyweight?
he's good. You know what? I'll tell you what. And it's weird to say because I'm different because I shouldn't be. I should be the norm. But you know, you ask guys, and I've been seeing this for 40 years in the game as a kid. Everybody talks bad about their opponent, right? Oh, the guy, he's got no body. He can't go to the body. He's got no stamina. It's like, and I'm always like, well, then what is beating him going to do for you? Like, why is it going to be? Why should we be giving you credit for beating this guy that you've spent the last 3 months telling us sucks? like, I don't get it, man. I would respect everything more if you told the truth. You say, man, like I always remember Tony Thornton getting ready to fight Roy Jones. Now, Tony Thornton was the #1 contender. Like he had proven himself against top guys. And when he got ready to fight Roy Jones at the last press conference, they said to him, Tony, so what do you think your plan is? What's the secret to beating Roy Jones? And Tony Thornton said, before the fight, he said, I was hoping you guys could tell me, because I don't know, and I respected that. He's being real. Basically, he's saying, look, I'm a good fighter. I'm going to go in and do the best I can, but I know I'm in with a superstar. I know I'm in with a special. For me to tell you he's not that good, I'd look crazy saying that, So, that's to say Bivol's very good. I mean, obviously, he's very good. He's very skilled. He's very patient, and Arthur's going to have to be on his game 100%. But I think his 100% against Bivol's 100%. I'm very happy with the matchup. Yeah, for sure.
Given what you've seen of Bivol in his career, are there any fights that you've looked at that are instructive for how you are preparing for this fight?
Um, Not particularly, just because he basically fights the same way. Like his style is his style. His objective is his objective. Um, I think we could extract a lot of information from that. And again, it's like you can watch Roy Jones in his prime, and you could say, well, he drops his hands. And when he throws his jab, he drops his right hand. If you throw the left hook at the same time, you're going to catch him every time. Well, that sounds good. That sounds really good, coach. Thank you for that insight. Now, find me a guy on earth who's going to be able to counter Roy Jones repeatedly, more than one time, lucky, and catch him with the left hook when he throws the jab. You know what I mean? So it's all about the execution. I know what guys do and what they're like. I can tell you what Muhammad Ali's weaknesses are. Cassius Clay had a million weaknesses. Who's going to beat him? Nobody. There's nobody going to beat him. So all his weaknesses didn't amount to anything because people can't touch his face, with a punch. So I think, but like I say, with the matchup, man to man and style to style, strength to strength, and all these things, I think at the end of it all, I think we have the better, tools to toolbox. But Bivol is a very good boxer, and Arthur's gonna have to be on his game. We're gonna have to be on the game in the corner. Everything's gonna have to be right on that night.
Has Artur faced anyone approximating Bivol's style before?
Um, I mean, I wouldn't say exactly. Now, like, Bivol's pretty. He's a good boxer, and he's a master boxer, and he takes his time. Gavadzik might have been similar to a degree. I think Gavadzik. I think he threw more punches. He was busier. I don't think Bivol is going to chance a whole lot against Artur. I don't think he's going to be Marvin Hagler, Tommy Hearns. I don't think we're going to see that. And I think he knows that. And I do think, and I've always been, even as an amateur, when I was a novice amateur, I was always like this. I'm always into the mental aspects of boxing, and I'm into the mental aspects of the particular guy. I would try to, even as a kid, I would try to, even in sparring, I would try to evaluate guys for weeks, like guys in my gym for weeks. I'd be thinking about them and I'd be watching them and their mentality, right? And I try to get something that I could use. And I think with Bivol, it could be a good thing for him. It could be a negative, but I think he's a little bit overly respectful of Artur. I think I've seen him, not just interviews, but I've seen him in Artur's company. I've seen them standing right next to each other. And I can read the body language super well, right? And Dmitry does not look comfortable when he's standing with Artur. When they're in the same room, he does not look comfortable. And when he talks about Artur, he's very respectful, but he's too respectful, I think. And I think that goes, it's almost like he doesn't want to trigger Artur. You know what I mean? He doesn't want to say anything to get him angry or upset. And and it's a psychological strategy, I guess. It's a certain guy. I guess I would imagine some guys did that with Tyson. They didn't want to give Tyson any more reason to be Tyson than Tyson already has. So who knows?
Do you think that what you're observing outside of the ring will translate in a way to how Bivol approaches Artur or doesn't approach Artur in the ring?
Right. Well, that's what I mean. Like sometimes it's come to fruition. Like sometimes I picked out things about guys and it worked. It was like dead on. We used it to take advantage of them, and other times it meant nothing. So, it could mean something. It could maybe not. But I think when it comes down to it, and if it becomes like everybody wants to fight their fight, right? And Bivol, for the most part, he's been able to fight his fight for his whole career, right? So that's all well and good. But the real test is when you reach a point where you can't fight your fight anymore. Something has changed. A monkey wrench has been thrown in, and now you got to do something else. If he's willing to do that, I don't know. If he's able to do that, I certainly don't know. I know that Artur can box and create problems, boxing wise, and obviously I certainly know that Artur can create destruction, with another strategy. So I think a lot of the fight is going to depend on how strong-willed Dmitry really is with this particular guy. And like I said, I feel good about the fact that I see certain things with him that bode in our favor.
Yeah. I mean, clearly these are the two best light heavyweights in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, this is obviously for the undisputed championship at 175. And as you're saying, they're going to be attempting to ask questions that haven't been necessarily been asked of each other before.
Right.
I think it's interesting that Artur, he's had 20 pro fights. As you mentioned, he had more than 200 amateur fights. So he doesn't necessarily have the same wear and tear from being in the pros that other guys his age would, but he is also 39. Do you notice at all any adjustments that he's had to make as he's getting older?
You know what? It's funny you say that because when I watch him, I never think about his age, and I find that it's kind of like amusing because I grew up in an era where when you were 32, that was considered the top of the hill. Once you got past 32, you were dropped. When Ali fought Foreman, the big thing was, oh, he's 32. He's an old man. He's all done. Hagler was 32 when he fought Leonard, right? And when Leonard was 34, he was washed up. Like he was completely done. Tommy Hearn, same thing. So it's a different day now. And with Artur, his mentality is so strong in the ring and out of the ring, that I think, I don't want to say he could go forever, but I don't think of his age. Like I don't see any signs of him. Like people said, "Oh, what's he gonna do? Is he gonna retire after this fight?" And I'm like, "No, I don't think so. I don't see any reason for him to retire. Like he'll he's still gonna come on strong all 12 rounds. He's actually a guy, and I mentioned this before. If you think about it, watch his fights and tell me I'm wrong. How many guys do you know in the second half of their 30s have improved, have gotten better? Now, when you watch Arthur's last few fights, he's good. Like he's become a well-rounded world-class champion, right? I thought his fight with Callum was the best he ever looked. I told Arthur that right after the fight with Callum Smith, and I said that's the best you ever looked. How many people can say that at 38? I think he was 38 at the time, 39, whatever it was. How many people can say that was their best performance against a high level of opposition? How many people have done their best performance in the 38 or 39 years old? Nobody. No one. Maybe Hopkins. Maybe Hopkins, he was older when he fought Trinidad, and then he had a couple good fights, in his mid 40s. So it's a different day. Fighters are lasting longer. Football players are bigger. They're lasting longer. It's a different world now.
It's very rare company among boxers, as you said, to still be performing and getting even better at this age. This fight was originally supposed to take place in June. Artur had knee surgery. How have you seen that recovery in his form?
He's fine. He's the type of guy. He went to, I think it was Siberia. I asked him. I read on the internet he was in Siberia, and I asked him, and he said somewhere else, but I don't know the names of all the places. But he basically went to Siberia on his own with a bicycle, and he was riding the bike up the mountains of Siberia. He was rehabbing himself, and so he was doing that like 2 months ago. So in the weeks I've been here in training camp, I've never his knee has not been an issue. To be honest with you, I forgot about it till you just mentioned it. To be honest,
You mentioned before that talking about the best opponents of Artur's career, who do you think has done the best against Dmitry Bivol so far?
um, actually, I mean, I'll say it this way: it wasn't Canelo. I'll tell you that much. It wasn't Canelo. Um, the guy, there was the guy from England who did very well with him. He actually lost on 1 point on the scorecard, and he
You're talking Craig Richards.
right,
Yeah.
and Craig, 1 point, like a 1 point loss on one of the scorecards. He did well. I thought that was the main one. I thought he beat Joe Smith, decisively. He beat him, comfortably. But and a lot of people don't realize this, and I believe this is true. If you remember, Joe caught Dimitri at the end of a round, big time. Like he caught him, and the bell rang literally like 2 seconds later. Like boom, boom, 2 seconds later. I would believe if that was Arthur and there was 20 seconds left, the fight's over. I think Joe had Arthur. I mean, had Dimitri hurt, what I call hurt. He wasn't just stung; he was hurt. He instinctively, if you remember, Bivol instinctively grabbed out for the top rope to hold himself up. Um, if Arthur's in there at that moment, there's a big problem. So he's shown, like, Arthur went down before, but Arthur wasn't hurt. Like, Arthur got up and stopped the guy like immediately after, right? Dimitri, I think he was really shook up by Joe Smith, and people don't know that because some people didn't catch it, and the bell rang. So once the bell rings, your mind goes blank. Like everything is, let's wait for the next round. So I think people didn't really give Joe the credit that he should have gotten for really dazing Dmitry.
I think a lot of eyes are going to be on this fight, not just because of what it means now, being for the undisputed championship, being between the two best light heavyweights that we wanted to see face each other for some years, but also because what it could mean for the future. You said that you don't think that Artur is done, you know, at 39 years of age. Where would you like to see him go if you triumph on October 12th?
Well, I think I would it would I would like if Canelo came back up, again, because it is what it is. Like I'm not a guy who calls people a coward or this guy was afraid. I understand it's a business and you're strategic and all that type of thing. But looking at it as a kid in the neighborhood and we're discussing sports, he went to light heavyweight twice and he did not fight Arthur. He did not choose to fight Arthur. So obviously there's a reason for that. I would love for Arthur to get that fight so he could make that kind of money, money that he deserves. I mean, he should be much more well known than he is. I mean, think about it. Like, if I said, "Hey, we got this guy. He's in the greatest shape anybody's ever been in. He can fight for 50 rounds if you need him to. He's knocked out everybody he's fought. He he wants to fight everybody. He's literally scared of no one on earth in any weight class. He would fight anyone on earth. Do you want to watch him or do you want to watch somebody else? I mean, why Arthur's not a superstar? I would assume it's because he doesn't talk stupid. He doesn't talk crazy. He doesn't go on the internet and make stupid videos, embarrassing himself in public so that people can talk about him. He refuses to do that. He would never do that. He would never demean himself to do that. So, because of that, in the way the world is today, he has to suffer visibility wise, financially wise, because he won't be the fool. It's something's wrong with that. Something's wrong with that whole picture.
I was thinking about Canelo's options now that he's beaten Edgar Berlanga. And for those listening to this conversation, we're having this conversation literally the day after Canelo Berlanga. There's not that many options at 168 that I think the general public would want to see Canelo face
Right.
that would support a pay-per-view. Although the fact that Canelo sold as much as he did with the box office for Berlanga is telling. So yeah, I do think that aside from a offered fight or somehow convincing Conor McGregor that a move to 175 for the winner of Beterbiev versus Bivol is the move. Did you think, having seen Canelo lose to Bivol, that Canelo would be too small for a light heavyweight?
Way too small. I mean, look, I would love for the fight for Arthur, but if you're asking me to be honest, yeah, of course he's too small. He's not gonna, he's way smaller than Arthur. Now, people say, oh, but he beat Kovalev. I said, listen, man, people forget what he did to Kovalev. He had Kovalev. Kovalev couldn't gain any weight after the weigh-in. He was allowed like 10 pounds or 8 pounds, whatever it was. That's it. You might as well just have him not gain any weight. Just shoot him in the head with a bullet. I mean, you killed him. You killed him with that stipulation, and that's why I say I don't call a guy a coward or anything like that. But when you fight a guy for his title and you say, okay, I want to fight you for your title, but these are the stipulations you have to follow after the weigh-in. That's like saying, I think I could beat you, but I'm really not sure, and I would like some assurance that I could do that. So if you beat the guy, like he beat Kovalev, fine, you beat Kovalev. Are you really going to brag about beating a guy that you forced to not gain weight after the weigh-in? You're not gonna put that feather in your cap, are you? Like that's an embarrassment. Um, you only were able to do that because you're in the financial driver's seat, not because you're the better fighter. That's not right. I'm not a fan of that at all. Uh, like I say, if you remember the fight with Triple G, and Triple G made Canelo look small, like at the weigh-in. I remember seeing a picture of them, and I was like, man, I didn't realize Canelo was that small. Well, that was against Triple G. Imagine what he's going to look like next to Artur. So, for the money and the the fame and all that stuff, I would love to see that fight. But I think a bigger fight, but probably less money, would be Benavides at 175.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, and I think we can probably end with that then is if the Canelo fight doesn't happen, you've got the two Davids, Benavidez and David Morel. Sounds like Benavidez is your preference of the two of them.
I mean, it would make the most sense because I mean, to be honest with you, and I know he's a good fighter, Benavides is a good fighter and all this stuff, but his style and his mentality, like you couldn't ask for more perfect for Artur. Like Artur would, like if you're going to match strength, like if people say the guy's the monster and all this stuff, I mean Artur's the monster now. Let's be real here. You're not he's not going to match strength with Artur. Like there's no chance of that.
So the final question, you just mentioned that Artur is not as well known as you think that he should be. So for the people who are listening, who aren't already as excited about this fight as you and I both are, why should they tune in to watch your guy, Artur Beterbiev, fight Dmitry Bivol on October 12th?
Well, the to the average fan, this should pique your interest. I mean, he's knocked out everybody he's fought. Like no one has went the distance with him. In that regard, he is the Mr. T of Rocky 3 of boxing today. No one has went the distance. Just that alone should be like, really? Like, let me check this guy out. Let me see who's the guy that nobody can hear the final bell with. And but not just that, like his commitment to the sport, his level of commitment and his strength and what I would call underrated boxing skills. Like a lot of people think Artur subconsciously they think he's like Mr. T in the Rocky movie. You know what I mean? He's just a destroyer. And I say, man, you gotta watch him. Like Arthur's a master boxer. Like he's very, very, very technical. And I think it's going to be a special fight. I think all the boxing, the real hardcore boxing people, I think they're as excited about this fight as any fight in the last 10 years. Like I would have to think, this is huge. But to the average fan, I know a guy who knocked out everybody he fought. So the chances of him winning by knockout are pretty high. Let's go watch that guy.